Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Judy and I love travel, history, and getting to know how people live. Today we're leaving Palermo on an overnight sleeper train, heading east across the north coast of Sicily to Messina, boarding, train and all, a ferry across the Straits of Messina to the Italian peninsula, more or less sleeping all the way to Pisa in Tuscany. The transit took me a total of around 20 hours, included a place to lie down and try to sleep, and an opportunity to see a really enormous ferry boat. Let's take a look as I go into the belly of the beast and emerge at the other end, safe if not completely rested in Pisa, today on The Armchair Traveler. I like trains, at least in Western Europe, and use them extensively for intercity travel, but I've only twice before taken overnight, once in 1970 from Florence through the mountains to Paris, and somewhat later from Helsinki to Moscow. I took an overnight train to Pisa because I wanted to experience a sleeper compartment, but more importantly, I wanted to see how they would get a train on a ferry. I have to say, when it was all said and done, it certainly wasn't a disappointment. It did like many refinements that YouTuber enthusiasts extol. No dining car, no bar car, the Wi-Fi didn't work, there was no fresh water except for one bottle in the compartment. Not even so much as a cup of coffee was available at Oh Dark 100 the next morning. Despite these deficits, which every user is warned about, TrenItalia had the virtue of getting me to where I wanted to go safely, and despite the number of opportunities for problems and delays, actually did so on time. Compare that to Amtrak performance for a similar distance, and Amtrak probably comes out second. I deliberately selected a noontime departure from Palermo because I wanted it to be light enough to actually see the crossing between Messina and San Giovanni on the boot of Italy. The ferry route is not the shortest distance, but it does travel between two established landfalls. My day did not start off promisingly, and that fact is reflected in the poor quality of many of my photos today, which is why so many of them I have had to borrow from Wikimedia Commons. On the way to the station, and I did have to check out of the hotel a bit early, I stopped off and sprang for a cappuccino, then wandered into a deli and bought bread, cheese, sliced salami, and a bottle of red wine, just in case the promised bar car turned out to be vaporware. It did. Not only was there no dining car, there was no bar car. There had been a terrible thunderstorm the evening before, and the rain and clouds hung on into the next morning. It stopped about mid-morning, which was very helpful, since the only practical way to get to the train station was to walk. My apartment was just off the main drag to the train station, so once I got to the main street, it was a straight shot there. The one thing that I didn't see that morning was a cab. There were plenty of them at the station when I came in, with the cabbies baying at the travelers like a pack of wolves, as I recall, and at me not just Italian and English, but occasionally in German. That didn't do me any good, since they all vanished when I really needed them. The only practical thing for me to do was to hoof it. When I took these photos, my back was either pressed tightly against the door or pressed into the window. I'm 5'9", but fortunately I don't generally sprawl, which is a good thing because there wasn't any room for it. The design of these cars is quite flexible, holding up to 3 seated passengers or 3 berths, but the per-person space is really tight. Outside the door, a narrow corridor runs the length of the train, complete with windows and a handrail. A lot of us passengers spent a fair amount of time gawking out those windows, trying to figure out just what exactly the train was doing when we got to Messina. There were 2 toilets at one end of the corridor near the attendants compartment. Everything was clean and tidy. In the daytime configuration, shown here, this compartment is designed to take 3 seated travelers. The person next to the window gets the view, but also the least amount of space for her feet. You can see the rack above the second bed, above the window, and a third bed actually drops down over the seats. My next-door neighbors, a mom, 2 daughters, and a rather nice and quite large dog, were traveling by that method. I didn't photograph it, but they had it made up, or perhaps had the attendant make it up, into nighttime configuration right away. I had read the reviews and brought along food and a couple of bottles of water, and it was a good thing. There was a sink, which was handy, but water in Italian and many other trains is not drinkable. I shudder to think of the consequences if you slip up, even so much as for brushing your teeth. Why is your blogger smiling? It's 12:35 p.m. and the train is rolling out of Palermo Centrale exactly on time. I'm in my cabin and my suitcase made it too. I've got bread, cheese, 2 bottles of water, a bottle of red wine, and I even remembered a corkscrew. This train was equipped with much older cars, apparently refurbished, but not exactly what anyone would call top of the line. However, everyone I met was pleasant. The train corridor, bathrooms, and compartment were absolutely spotless, and the attendant promised he'd help me get off on time. The train might be lacking in the kind of amenities that make travelers swoon, but it was absolutely as advertised. The only question was what time we'd actually roll into Pisa Centrale. The schedule called for 5:57 a.m. and said I'd have exactly 3 minutes to hop down. I needed to be ready. Once you make it to the ferry port, a complicated dance takes place to disconnect and reconnect the rail cars and then move them in the ferry boat in the right order. That operation took close to 2 hours, moving the train back and forth as the individual cars were shuttled onto one of the tracks inside. The ferry carried my train. Its final destination was Milan, as well as some cars connecting from a second train, this time starting out from Syracuse on the southeast coast via Catania. Looking at this ship, you'll see a lot of rust. Rust is the common enemy of all sailors, and I've seen it on ships before, but I have to admit, you really don't usually see this much. They need to get out there with scraper bars and white lead. Even so, the inside, considering that it was basically just a switching station, was immaculately clean. You see a picture courtesy of Wikimedia Commons. This is the huge maw through which individual train cars are pushed in the complicated dance path. The photo shows the opening to better advantage and was taken by someone who was allowed to get off the train, which we were not. I think we were confined to the train because we had arrived so late. The photo on the left shows you the enormous gaping maw of the ferry boat, through which individual train cars are pushed in a complicated dance pattern designed to get everything in the right order. Once our cars were all tucked safely into the belly of the beast, we were allowed to climb down, then up the rather steep steps to the deck. There are stairs, but no elevator. Here are the views of me leaving the port of Messina. That thing on the top right is a lighthouse, and on the bottom right is another lighthouse, apparently said to resemble the lighthouse of Alexandria. On the bottom left is me on deck, getting thoroughly windblown. There was down in the belly of the beast that said, "To the bar," and pointed upwards, so I went up. There was a bar, cash only, and some kind of fried food which I took a pass on. The bartender asked me if I wanted beer, and I said yes, and then he asked me if I wanted a glass, and I said no thank you. This shows you the nighttime configuration when the compartment is made up for just one person. To take it, I had to move my suitcase into the hallway. I don't generally sleep very well at home, even in my own bed, so I wasn't expecting to do more than doze intermittently. And actually, I did better than that. The bunk was quite comfortable, and even though we did make 27 stops, most of them were only for a couple of minutes. Surprisingly to me, my train pulled in absolutely on time at 5:57 a.m., and I was ready and stumbled off as quickly as possible. You have to be quick. Intermediate stops often last no more than 2 or 3 minutes. I was here for a day trip and moving on at the end of the day. The station had what I needed, including a luggage storage area, clean restrooms, security in the Piazza Miracole, where the Leaning Tower of Pisa is located, is incredibly strict, with military carrying machine guns, and a McDonald's, which opened up at 7 a.m. and managed to produce a reasonably fresh croissant and a pretty good cappuccino. I partook and enjoyed. Like most of Italy, however, there is unemployment and a homeless problem. The station has opened up a concreted area fairly close to the tracks, where homeless people are allowed to camp with sleeping bags. It's covered over, but not heated. Rough sleeping is a thing here and might be a little unnerving to see, but not nearly as unnerving as the notion that without this space, these people would be sleeping completely unprotected and out on the streets. Most people come to Pisa just to see the fabulous Leaning Tower, but there's quite a bit more. The Miracle Plaza is located near the medieval city walls and houses not just that tower, but a cathedral, a baptistry, and a great deal more. It's a mere 20-minute walk northward from the station. Not everything touted in tourist guides lives up to the hype, but this does. If you arrive early and you have your ticket in hand, you can even see it in comfort and relative quiet. Thank you for joining me today for the overnight train experience, which, when I totaled up the pluses and minuses, came out definitely on the positive side. Come back next time and we'll visit the tower and more of Pisa and learn about the city's Roman heritage on the Armchair Traveler.